Here's our complete Adobe Premiere Pro tutorial for beginners. I'm going to show you everything you need to know, all the key features, and a ton of video editing tips to get you cutting videos in Premiere like a pro fast. Now, if you've already been using Premiere for a while, drop a comment down below while you're watching with your #1 tip for editing in Premiere to help out others that are new. All right, so jumping straight into it, we're here now in Adobe Premiere Pro on a Mac. Now, the process is going to be pretty much exactly the same if you're on Windows as well. So this is what you'll see when you first open up the program. You have a list of all your recent projects in the middle here. So if you want to continue working on a project, this is where it will be. Or if you want to make a new project like we're going to do here, you want to come up the top left to New Project. So what we're seeing now is essentially this import tab. The 3 primary tabs or areas in Adobe Premiere now: import, edit, and export. And it's really the 3 processes or the 3 main steps that you're going to do when you're making a video. So the first thing we're going to do though is we're going to give our project a name. So I'm going to go Justin Edit. We can choose where we want our project to be saved. We can come over here to our import settings and we get to choose whether our media or any of our files are going to stay on our computer where they currently are, or if we're going to copy our media to the same location that we've created our project in. I'm going to leave this one unchecked. We'll leave our media where it is. We can also specify here to create a new bin or a new folder for any of the footage that we want to import straight away here. And we can also choose if we want to create a new video sequence yet or not. And a video sequence is essentially your edit or your timeline. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn that one off as well for now, because I want to show you how to set everything up correctly so that you know that you're using the right settings for your footage and for the videos that you're making. So we could go through here and we could find our video footage. For me, I've got some saved on the desktop under video files. I could come through here and select the footage that I want to import. But to me, I'd rather do it the more traditional way with Adobe Premiere. So we're just going to go ahead down the bottom here and hit create. So we're just essentially creating an empty project. So you can see now that we've done that, we're actually now over on this edit tab. And if any time we want to go back to the import one, we can click that up the top here, edit and export, which we'll get to a little later. Now, quick overview of the interface. Up here is where we'll be able to view our source video clips and play them and preview them before we're actually using them in our project. We've also got all our effect controls and volume and everything. All of that happens up here in this top left corner. Over here on the right, this is our program or playback window. This is where we can preview everything that we are editing. Down the bottom here is your main editing tool. This is the editing timeline. We've got our audio bars over the side here, or the visual representation of how loud or quiet our music and sound effects are. We've got our editing tool panel in the middle here with a lot of our core editing tools and features. This is where we'll access those. And then down the bottom left-hand corner here, this is by default, this is your project window where we can see all the media and assets that we've imported. We've also got access to a media library here, and even all of your effects and transitions. They're all down in this area. So I'm gonna leave this for now back on project. So this is where we'll be importing our footage. So down in this area here, we can right click and we can choose import, or we can come up the top to file, import. And we can navigate through and find the video files, music, all the assets that we want to use in our video. So mine's on the desktop under video files. I'm just going to hit import on this to bring in those 3 folders. And you can see it's actually kept the file and folder structure here as well, so that everything is organized as it was on the computer. Now, the other option you've got is to open up a file browser, like in Windows Explorer or in Finder, and you can drag and drop your files into your project that way as well. So now that we have our files in, the next step is to create our editing timeline, or our sequence as Premiere calls it. So what I like to do here to make sure we're getting everything set up correctly is I want to go and find my primary video footage, and I want to click and drag that into this area. It even says here on the screen, drop media here to create a sequence. So when we let that go, it's going to create our timeline, our sequence, but it's also going to use the exact format, frame rate, and settings that were used for our primary footage, so that we know that it is an exact match. So we don't have to manually go in and configure everything. It's going to apply the settings from that main file. So you want to go ahead now, drop your primary footage into your timeline here. We can then come back over here. You can see we've got our timeline here, or our sequence. We can call this edit V1, version 1. And maybe we'll move it out of this footage folder here and drop it down the bottom so that it's out there on its own. Now, it's a good idea to save your project at this point. Just choose File, save, because depending on the computer you might be using, Premiere has been known to be a little bit buggy. Now that we've got our primary footage in, now it's time to start trimming it down, to remove all the bad stuff, the mistakes, the stuff that we don't want to have in our finished video. And there's a few different tools that you can use to do this. So I'm going to zoom in at the start of our project here by selecting our timeline, hitting the plus key on the keyboard, or you can see we can also use this slider down the bottom here to zoom in and out. And what we can see on the left here is we've got V1, 2, and 3. These are our video tracks or video layers. So our primary track now is video 1, and we've got 2 empty layers on top of that, which we will use a little bit later on. But we've also got the same thing for the audio. So we've got our primary audio track, audio 1, and we've got a couple of spares. Now you can actually add a lot more layers as you go, but know that you can also control them in this window here as well. So if you want to turn off your primary layer, you want to hide what's shown on screen for that layer, then you've got the little eyeball here that you can turn that on or off. You can also mute or solo a track. And you also have the ability to click down here to record a voiceover as well. So now what we want to do is start to trim down our footage, remove any of the bad takes, any of the mistakes, or anything we don't want to have in our finished video. So at the start of this video here, I do a quick little microphone test and I say 1, 2, 1, 2. So we want to remove all of that. So let's say we want our video to start here just before I start talking. Now, as with anything with video editing, there's lots of different ways to essentially do the same thing. So I'm going to show you a few different ways that we can remove this and start to trim down our footage so that you know what tools you have access to, because sometimes it's going to be much quicker to use one way over another. So in this case here, if we want to remove everything to the left, we can literally come across here to the edge of the clip and see that the arrow cursor changes. We can click and drag that back to where we want our clip to start, and our clip now will start at this point. Now we do have this empty space at the start, so we will want to close that up. We can just click our clip and drag it back, and our video now is going to start at that point. Now, if I undo that using Control Z or Command Z back to where we were before, another way that we could remove all that footage to the left and have our video start here is we can split or cut our timeline at this point. So we press Command K if you're on Mac or Control K if you're on Windows, and that's going to cut our clip. K for cut, makes perfect sense, at that time. So then all we need to do is select this clip. We can press delete on the keyboard and it's going to remove it. Now, once again, this does leave the gap here in the timeline. So if we delete that, so we've still got that cut, it's still split into 2 clips. We can actually select this clip on the left that we want to remove, and we can press Shift Delete on Windows or Shift Function Delete on Mac. And it's actually going to remove the clip and it's going to close up the gap automatically. So it's a ripple delete. Now on Mac, you can also use Option Delete. So you're pressing one less key and it's going to do the same thing. Now, if we zoom back out, we go across to the end of our video here. Zoom back in a little bit. You can see that I actually stopped speaking here. So let's assume the video finishes here and we want to remove everything on the end. We could just come across here again, grab the end of our video and let it go where we want our video to finish. Or another really fast way to remove all of this with one keyboard button press is just to press W on the keyboard, which is a ripple edit to the right. So it's essentially going to automatically, when we press it, make a cut in our timeline. It's then going to select everything back to our previous edit, or to the end of our clip in this case, and it's going to select it and remove it and close up the gap. So if I press W now, you can see that all of that has happened with one keyboard button press. So that's to the right, but this also works to the left as well. So let's say we've got a cut in our timeline here, Control K to make it cut, and we want to remove just this first piece here and start this piece of the video from where I start talking here. So we want to move our playback head to where we want to perform this cut. So we can just press Q on the keyboard this time. So Q to the left, W to the right. So we're going to remove everything to the left with Q, and that section is gone and removed from our timeline. So this is a really powerful tool, a really fast way that you can edit down a lot of footage really, really quick. So you want to go through now, remove any mistakes, bad takes, or anything you don't want to have in your video. And obviously with this as well, you can use a combination of mix and match to edit in the fastest way for you. Now, once you've done that, all these little clips or chunks of footage, you can actually pick up and move around. So if you find that you want to reorder or you want to move some of this stuff around, we can easily do that just by clicking and dragging and repositioning them. And if you are left with a gap like this in the timeline, we can either select all of our clips just by drawing a box around it and by moving our clips across. Or if I undo that, I can actually select the gap and I can press delete, and that will close the gap for us. So now that we've removed all the stuff that we don't want to have in our edit, the next step is to bring in any B-roll or overlay footage. So I'm going to come over here to my B-roll folder, I can double click on one of our clips here to preview it at the top, or I can just click and drag the entire clip onto the timeline. Now, if we don't want to bring the whole clip in, if it's a really long video file, then this is where up the top here, we can essentially just highlight or section out the piece that we want to use, and we can just drag that unique piece down into the timeline. So we can play through or scrub through our footage here. Let's say that we want this bit here where I'm opening up the switch pod. I can just press I on the keyboard or hit the little mark in point here. So that's our in point, and let's go through to here. I can then choose mark out or press O on the keyboard, and then I can click and drag this clip down here into our timeline. Now you can see by default, we're getting a video and audio source that comes in with this. If I undo that now, Command Z or Control Z. If I decide I only want to have the video and no audio, I can just come up here and grab the drag video button, and we click and drag that down into the timeline. And now we've just got the video, or just the audio if we want to just bring in the sound. So you want to go through now and bring in any of your B-roll or overlay footage, whether it's marking it out up the top here as I am, and dragging those down, or whether you're just dragging them in from the side and then making the adjustments using the same editing tools that we just covered. Now we can see that a lot of these B-roll clips that I just brought in here, they have audio associated with them. We can easily just mute that entire audio track just by hitting the M here and know that these now are muted. Now for us, the place that we go for a lot of our B-roll or overlay footage when we're not shooting it specifically for the video itself is to Storyblocks and to ArtGrid, and I'll have links to those down in the description. So once you've got your B-roll and overlay footage in, the next step is to go through and add in any titles or text into your video. So if we come back to the start of the video here, we can just come over to the type tool. We can then come up to the top here and we can draw out a text box, and we can literally just start typing. And we can see that that's generated a title down in our timeline, this little pink thing here. Now, if we double click on that pink title, then this is where we can open it up and get far more control over the look and feel of this title. So if I select the text here, and I can change the font. Let's go Oswald, which is our primal video font. Let's go semi-bold. We can also add a background behind it. We can adjust the opacity on that box. So let's make it like a light blue, like a primal video kind of blue, something like that. Now, if we want to change the position and maybe move it down a little bit, we can come over here to our transform tools. So we can bring this down a little bit here now. And we can even save this once we're happy with it as a style. So we can come over here to styles. We can choose create a style. Let's call it PV for primal video. Go OK. Now, next time we want to create a title, we can just select, we can type in our text, and we can select that text and pick our style. And it's now using the same settings as what we saved down the bottom here. I'm gonna come up the top here where we've got that second layer of text. I'm just gonna clear that to delete it. And we've now got some text down the bottom that will appear at this point in the video at the start, and it will disappear at the end. So if we zoom in on this now, then these also behave just like every other clip. So we can shorten them, we can extend it, we can pick it up, we can move it around. So you want to go through now and add in any titles or text into your video. Now you'll also notice that when I double clicked on this to open it up, it actually changed up our interface here. We've now got this new essential graphics panel that's appeared here on the right. We can actually at any time go to Window, Workspaces, and we can just go reset to saved layout, and that's going to change everything back to our normal layout. So you want to go through now and add in any titles or text into your video. From there, we're going to add in any transitions or effects into our edit. So if we come over here to effects, then down here we've got video effects, and we've also got video transitions. So if we open up video transitions, let's just go to dissolve. Now there's a lot in here to choose from, and a lot of them can make your video look pretty cheap or pretty amateurish. So what I suggest is that you're sticking to things like the dip to black, dip to white, or cross dissolve, or even a film dissolve. They're the much more popular, much more widely used in broadcast transitions without going overboard. So let's say that we want to fade in our title at the start here. Let's come back to the start of our project and pressing plus to zoom in. We can grab this cross dissolve transition and we can drop it on the start of our graphic here. And you can see that it goes green, and we now have this cross dissolve on here. So as we play through this now, you can see that for the length of that transition on here, our clip is fading on. Now we can shorten that to speed it up, or we can lengthen it to slow it down, but that's how easy it is to add some of these effects and transitions onto your timeline. So maybe we'll have one at the end as well, so our title can fade back out, and we'll make it a little bit quicker as well. So we've now got a title that fades in, stays on screen, and then fades back out at the end. Now you can also add these transitions between your video clips as well. So say if we grab this dip to black and let's drag it to the join between the two clips here on our timeline, then our video would play through, would fade out or dip to black and then come back in. So if you want to fade between one scene and another, then that's normally something you would do with a transition. Now, in terms of a transition in a video like this, where essentially it's the same shot before and after the transition, I wouldn't normally do this. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to press delete to remove it. Instead, what I would do with our YouTube content is just zoom in on one of the clips so that it looked like it was essentially a separate camera angle or a more zoomed in shot to break it up for the viewer. So to do that, I would just select one of the clips, come up here to effect controls, come down here to scale, and I would increase this number. Now you don't want to go too much. Depending on how you've shot this and your setup here, you could actually be lowering the quality of your video slightly. So don't go overboard with this. And you can see now, if we look at the difference in the shot, that's the original. And then when it hits this point, it zooms in for this next part of the video, breaking it up for the viewer. Now, in order to really sell this effect, you want to make sure that if you've got someone's face on screen, you want to try and keep their eyes in a very similar position. So I'm just going to move this across now to try and line up my eyes. So it's not perfect, but it's much closer now that that effect is going to be more subtle for your viewers watching. Now, when you're going through and adding effects, if you do want to speed up or slow down a clip or play a clip backwards, you can just right click on a clip and all of your speed control is over here under speed duration. So to increase the speed, we could increase this number. So from 100% to 200%, it's now going to be twice as quick, but I'm just going to cancel out of that one. So you want to go through now, add in any transitions, any effects, or zoom in on any of your footage to make it look the way that you want. The next step is to add in any music or sound effects into your video. So I'm going to come back over here to project. Let's open up our files, our music that we imported earlier. Or if you need to import some, again, right click, choose import and go and find your music files. Now, if you don't have any music for your videos, where we go for ours is primarily Artlist, but also Epidemic Sound. So I'm going to pick this track here and just click again and drag it into our timeline. And again, you can see it appears on an audio track down the bottom. Now, these are just the same as every other type of clip. We can click on it, pick it up, we can move it around. So let's make it start at the start of our video. We can go across to the end of our video, make sure that it's going to finish at the same time as our edit. So we trim the end off. And if you needed to make any cuts or remove any sections or even repeat sections of your audio track, then again, you can use it using the same tools I showed you for editing at the start. So now that you've got your music track in, it's a good idea to play through your footage, and you might find that you are adjusting some of your edits or adjusting some of your cuts to match the beat of the music and the feel and the overall vibe. So you want to do another pass, just tightening, refining, and maybe moving things around so that it all flows the way that you'd like. From there, we're going to go ahead and adjust all of our volume levels. And so where I like to start with this is if you've got a video like this where there is someone speaking or there's a voiceover or a narration, we want to make sure that that is set right correctly first, and then we'll adjust the volume for our music and sound effects and things afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute our music track here now. And we're going to set the volume for my voice here first. So we want to come back to the start of our edit here and just hit play. And what we're looking at here is over in this audio bars here, we want to make sure that our volume is in the green, into the yellow a little bit, but definitely not up into the red. If our volume is hitting the top here, if this top section is lighting up red, it means that our sound or our volume is too loud and it's distorting and it's going to sound really bad. So we have the ability in here to either adjust on a clip by clip basis, or we can actually adjust volume levels across an entire audio layer. So do all the clips at once. So to do it individually, we want to click on a clip, again, come up here to our effect controls. And if we click the little arrow to expand this down, we can see that we've got our volume levels here. So if we want to increase our volume, we can drag that up. Let's just go something crazy so I can show you what it looks like if it's too loud. So if we play this now, you can see that we're hitting the red. It is way too loud. So we want to bring that back down to the point where we're close to it, but definitely not at any point in our video hitting that red. So we'll set this to 1 just to boost it up a little bit and hit play. And you can see that it's not getting close at all to the top. So we could go through and do the same and adjust all of these manually, or with our first clip selected, we can come up here to where we made that adjustment, volume level 1. I can right click, I can choose copy. I can then zoom out on our timeline here, select the remaining clips, and I can choose edit, paste. And all of those now, you see they've now got the yellow effects logo on them. They are all now set to the exact same volume level. Now, the other way that we can adjust our volume across the entire track is by coming up here to Window and selecting Audio Track Mixer. It's going to pop up here. So don't get this confused with Audio Clip Mixer. We want to adjust the audio across the entire track here. So we can see here down the bottom, we've got audio 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these line up with our audio tracks 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we want to make adjustments overall to every clip on this audio track 1, then we want to come over here to audio 1, and we can make the adjustments with this slider up or down to be applied to every clip on that track. So I'm just going to undo that now. So it's back at 0. And then in terms of our music track, we've got exactly the same settings as well. We can do it on an individual clip by clip basis, or we can do it on the entire track. So first off, we want to remember to unmute our audio here. I'm going to come back to Effect Controls. I'm going to come down here to our level, volume level. And where we're normally dropping this is to anywhere between -20 and -35, depending on the audio track and how loud we actually want to have the music in our videos. So I'm just going to go -33. I'm going to play that back and I'm going to see what that sounds like. And then we can make adjustments up and down from there if it's too loud or too quiet. Now, one other thing I like to do when I am adjusting my volume levels is to zoom in on this section of the timeline as well. Now we can do it down here with these little sliders here going up and down on the side. We can make these video layers bigger or smaller. So we could stretch this up. We can then slide this down and then we can access more detail on what it is we're looking at. Now you can also see that now that we've zoomed in, we also have this little line across the bottom here. Now this is also our volume level. So if I click on this and drag it up, we can see that the volume has increased back to, in this case, 0.1 decibels. And we can drop that back down to where we had it at -33 just by lifting this line up and down. So if I undo that. But what we can also do is keyframe or manually adjust our volume levels throughout the entire track, because sometimes you'll want it louder in one point and then quiet in another. We can do all of that with keyframes. So let's say that we wanted our audio here starting at the -33, and then for a section up here, we want it much louder. We want it back to full volume. We can click on this little Create Keyframe button. We can then come across along a little bit more, and we can add a new keyframe. And then from here, we can grab this line again and move it up to the volume that we want. And our volume now is at that point for the remainder of the video. So then we work out where we want it to come back down to a quieter volume. We can again add a transition point, or a keyframe it's called, where we want that transition to start and where we want it to end. And then we can make the adjustments in there back to lower our volume back down. And these are things that you can come back in and you can adjust afterwards. You can pick them up, you can move them around, all to really get that granular control over your sound. Once we're done with our volume levels, the next thing we're going to do is to color grade or color correct your video footage. So again, I like to do this on the first clip first, because you'll probably find, like in this case, it's same camera, same light. So we can apply the same color grade or color effect that we're going to apply to the bulk of our footage, and then make any minor tweaks or adjustments to individual clips as we need to. So we're going to select our first clip. We're going to come up here to Window, and we're going to turn on what's called Lumetri Color. Now there is a ton of settings in here, all to help you really dial in and bring out the look and feel for the video that you're after. So we are by no means going to cover off everything in here, but by default under this Creative tab, so if you're not seeing it, you can click on Creative. This is the default panel that shows up. In here, you've got some looks, and think of these as if they're like Instagram filters, where you've got different presets or different looks that you can go through and apply to your videos. Now, obviously we can go through and we can customize these up with a bunch of tools in here as well. But the idea here is if you find something that matches close to what you're after, it might make sense to start with one of these looks first and then make minor adjustments instead of starting with your raw footage and trying to work towards one of these looks. But because we're not going to go overboard with color correcting here, I'm going to go back to the top here and select none. So we don't have any of these filters or looks applied. And what I'm going to choose here is the basic correction panel. And the first adjustment I'm going to make is to the exposure or the brightness of the shot. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to grab this slider. If we want to make it brighter, we drag it to the right. Want to make it darker, we drag it to the left. So you want to make sure that the brightness is where you want it for your shot first. And again, I want you to remember that this is art. This is a creative thing. There is no
right or wrong. This is going to help with the feeling that your video is creating based on how it looks. So we usually start off first with the exposure and then the contrast. Again, if we slide this one way, we're going to remove contrast. We're going to increase contrast if we go the other way. So I've darkened up some of those blacks. The next one I adjust is the white balance. Now we could just grab this little eyedropper here and select something white in our scene, like this shelf here, and that's going to get it pretty close. Or we can manually use these sliders here for temperature and add more blue or cool down our shot a little bit. Or likewise back the other way, add more warmth by adding more orange. And the same with the tint. We can add more green or remove green by adding more pink using the next slider. Now, if we want to see a before and after, we can come up here where we've got basic correction. There's a little check box here. We can turn that off and on. So this is the before, this is the after. So we've really just brightened it up and added a bit more color. And the last slider that is pretty helpful as well is the saturation one here. If we want to boost the colors or amplify them, we can just move this a little bit. You don't want to go too much or you look totally sunburned. But likewise, back the other way, you can remove color too. So we might add a little bit more color here, something like that. And again, if this is something that we want to apply to the rest of our clips, we can come over here to our effect controls and you'll see that we've got the Lumetri color tab in here. Again, we can copy the settings that we've applied there. We can select the rest of our footage here and we can paste it, edit, paste. And that's going to apply those same color grades or same effects to the remaining clips. So you want to go through now, color grade all of your footage, including any of your B-roll clips as well. And then it is time to export your video. So I want to come over here then to the export tab. And then as with everything in Premiere, you got a ton of options in here. Now there are presets for things like YouTube and Vimeo and Twitter, you can see here down the left. And if you're going to use these, it will automatically upload your video to YouTube as well. So you can sign into your YouTube channel, enter your title, description, all of that, all from Premiere. So once your video has finished exporting, it's also going to upload to YouTube for you. Now this actually does work really well, but personally what I do instead is I go for a media file. So I'm just exporting an MP4 or a regular video file and saving that to my computer, and I'm manually uploading it once I'm happy with it. So I want to preview it and check it's all good before it goes off to YouTube. So for that, we want to go to media file. We can choose a file name here. We can choose our location where we're going to save our file. Now, typically the settings here by default are usually pretty good because they're based on your project settings, which were based on your primary footage when we created our timeline back at the start. So we can see here just the default settings are matching 1920 by 1080, 25 frames per second. That's our video source. The output that it's suggesting is 1920 by 1080, 25 frames per second. So it's matched that. And it's also got a suggested quality or target bitrate here as well. But what I like about this in Premiere is it also tells you the file size that it's going to create for you too. So if you need to create a video with a specific file size or you need to try and keep it small, then this is going to give you an estimated file size here before you have to wait for the thing to export. Now, if you are someone who needs to customize everything up, obviously you've got all the settings in here to be able to really dial everything in. But again, for most people, you'll probably find that the default settings here are going to be pretty close to what you're after. Then all you need to do is hit export and your file is going to save out. Once it's done, you want to play it back and preview it, ideally on a mobile device as well. If that's where a lot of people are going to be consuming your content, you want to make sure that you're happy with how it looks and sounds and everything there. If you've got any changes, come back into Premiere, make them, and obviously export again. And once you're happy with it, that's when you can go ahead and share your video out.
So that's a complete walkthrough using Adobe Premiere. Now, if you want to print out and download the exact step-by-step process that I just took you through in this video, that will actually apply to any editing app or program to help you edit faster and more efficiently, then grab your free copy using the link on screen now, and I'll see you in the next video.